Thanks for joining us. I'm Nancy Furness, and this is We've Got Issues. We're recording today at Coquitlam City Centre Library, and we'd like to thank the library for giving us the space to carry out our interviews. And before we get started, I'd also like to acknowledge that our interviews are taking place on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded lands of Coquitlam First Nation. I'd like to thank the Coquitlam people who continue to live on these lands and to care for the lands and the waters and all that lies above and below. Today, I'm joined by Ian McArthur, who is president of Burke Mountain Naturalists. So thanks so much for joining us today, Ian.
Thank you for inviting me.
Now, Burke Mountain Naturalists is a group that's been around for a long time. They have a deep knowledge of the local environment and ecology. Can you start us off by telling us a little bit about when and why Burke Mountain Naturalists came into being? Was it a community need or a specific environmental issue at the time? If you can give us a little bit of a background.
Yeah, sure. The Burke Mountain Naturalists started in 1989. There were members of the Vancouver Natural History Society, and they were living in the Tri-Cities, so they figured it would be a good idea to start a group in the local area. So, but there were issues going on at that time. There were issues like Colony Farm. There was a threat of a racetrack or the P&E going in there. Also the threat of Burke Mountain, and and also stopping logging in the watershed as well.
Right, that was a big one.
That was a big issue in the early days, yeah. So I came in more to do with Burke Mountain. So I came into the group in about 1992, and there was a push at that point to protect the area, to have a provincial park.
Okay, so lots of history and a lot of multiple issues going on at the time when the group was first initiated and brought into being. Can you tell us now, like Burke Mountain Naturalists have evolved and they do a lot of things within the community. Can you just give us an oversight of some of the types of events and activities? What does the group do on an ongoing basis?
Yeah, so we lead hikes, we lead walks, bird walks. We also do work parties where we remove invasive plants. We work on bat boxes, so we have a specialty person that is kind of our bat guy.
The bat guy?
Yeah, or Batman, maybe you can, yeah. And so he's very knowledgeable about bats and does a lot of work with that. And also we organize wildlife census, like going out on bio blitzes and things like that, where we count different natural organisms and things like that.
So you kind of track things over time. You have an idea of if something is going down in population or if there's an issue occurring with a certain species, and lots of data. And also you have speakers that you bring in as well.
Right, we have monthly meetings. Some of them are in person and some of them are via Zoom, and they're open to the public. And we have a variety of fabulous presenters.
And they're also available online, if some of them, if folks want to go and look at them later?
Yeah, majority of them we record. So either our members or people of the public that want to see them, they can go onto our website and check that out.
And as far as joining Burke Mountain Naturalists, how would somebody go about doing that? If they wanted to be part of your group, you have a membership, how would people become a member?
The best way I would say is to come out onto one of our events and see what we're like. You're able to come out on 3 hikes before joining, so just see what we're about. But you can join either at a club event or at one of our meetings or on our website.
Excellent, so everybody's welcome to come and join in and check out Burke Mountain Naturalists and see what you're up to and how they can become involved as well.
Yeah.
Now, Burke Mountain is, of course, a prominent local feature in the Tri-Cities, and it has a long history, but a recorded history of over 100 years. Can you tell us maybe some of the lesser-known stories that helped to shape that area? Like, tell us a little bit about Burke Mountain itself.
Yeah, so of course the First Nations were here for thousands of years before that. What use they used of it, I'm not exactly sure, but they would have used it. But I would imagine the first thing that started on Burke Mountain would have been some homes going on the lower slopes, which some of those homes are long gone. At one time there were some orchards that were on Burke Mountain.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and old homesteads. And the lower slopes, up until probably 10 years or so ago, were large parcels of land. So it was large properties. A lot of those are disappearing now with a higher density going in.
Right, and at some point, wasn't there even a ski lodge? I don't know if it actually opened or not, but there was like talk of putting a ski lodge in there back in the day when we got a little bit more snow in the winter.
Right, so back in the 60s, there was a ski hill with just a single rope tow. And a friend of mine actually learned how to ski on Burke Mountain.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so there was a lodge. By the time I was able to go up into that area in the early 80s, this ski lodge had been burnt down. So it didn't last very long. Burke Mountain isn't very high compared to the local ski hills.
Right.
So it wasn't a great hill for snow and that. So.
And even less so now, I guess we're getting less snow in the winters and warmer winters. I do remember snowshoeing up there many years ago.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about now Burke Mountain Naturalists? The landscape has changed quite a bit from early settlements. There was logging at one point, I believe, as well. And how is that transition now into our rapidly changing communities and densification? Yeah,
so the logging, as far as I know, is a little over 100 years ago when it was done. And a lot of those old roads that were used for logging are now hiking trails. And a lot of the people don't realize that they're actually walking on old logging roads and across old logging bridges in some cases. But the one good thing about it becoming a park in 1995 is that it actually stopped the encroachment of development. So it was a great thing that the park came into be before a lot of the development came on the lower slopes.
So kind of drawing a line in the sand.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Can you talk a little bit more about the role that Burke Mountain Naturalists have played in protecting Burke Mountain? You're talking about the provincial park. Tell us a bit about all the things that Burke Mountain Naturalists have done and contributed to protection of Burke Mountain.
Yeah, so I guess the first part of it, because we started in 1989, and the push for it to become a park probably was in about 1992, so not long after the group was formed. And so there was a big push at that time. That's when I joined the group. And once the park was protected, there were a lot of studies that were done on what was in the park, and a lot of knowledge of people that had been going up in that area long before it became a park. So that really helped on having it become a park for the reasons the value of it.
Right, and Burke Mountain Naturalists were directly involved in pushing that forward and making sure that area was protected. And also, you've done some work. I've seen you up on Burke Mountain marking trails and clearing trails. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so in the early days, I was a part of making trails in the Burke area in the Widgeon Valley. That was in the 90s. And once it became a park, BC Parks kind of told the Burke Mountain Naturalists that we don't really want you in there working on the trails.
Or?
I think it was just that it was their job to do.
Okay.
And but the trails were becoming in worse shape, right. and you know, we'd go out sometimes with BC Parks and do some work, but there was a lot of different people that were working on the trails. The mountain biking crowd has really have a lot of trails in the lower slopes of Burke Mountain. So right. they're a big users of the park or of Burke Mountain as well. Right. But in about 2015, we were approached by BC Parks saying, well, I think we can work together on this. So we figured that it probably wouldn't work good as the Burke Mountain Naturalists doing work. So we formed sort of a side group from the Burke Mountain Naturalists called the Pinecombe Burke Stewards. Oh, okay. So this is a separate group from Burke Mountain Naturalists. But it was mainly Burke Mountain Naturalist members. Okay. And so we formed a group called the Pinecombe Burke Stewards, and we started working on trails, improving them, some signage, markers. So it's something that was really great to be working with BC Parks on that. And we don't have a formal agreement right now, but we do go out sometimes and work with BC Parks.
Okay, that's interesting because Burke Mountain is a large area, and you can get up high and get into some quite different terrain. We'll talk about that in a minute. But I know that we've hiked up towards the top, and sometimes you really do need those trail markers. So, you know, with GPS and different things, trail apps, it's helpful, but to have those markers in place as well is really important, and it's an ongoing work, right? It doesn't just happen once.
Yeah, it's interesting that when I started hiking up there in the 90s, it was interesting because there were mainly only 3 trails, and they were color coordinated, and they were mainly for the skiers and for some hikers. But there was sort of the red trail, which was the Munro Lake Trail, the yellow trail, which was the Village Trail, and I don't remember the other one.
And one more.
Yes, there was the red trail. I'm just trying to remember which one it was. But so there was complaints, you know, to do with that. It was a mountain that was difficult to find, and then especially with when the mountain bike trails came in, it became basically a maze up there.
Right.
And so ourselves and there's other people that have put up signs now as well. So.
Okay, and I guess for local folks who are familiar with that mountain, it's fine, but now we're getting more people coming in from outside of the Tri-Cities, and I think Burke Mountain is becoming a better known hiking destination, and so you do run the risk of people going up there without knowing, without having that background or being familiar with the trails. So. Now, you'd mentioned a few of the walks, and I know that you have been on all of these hikes many times. And can we just start with maybe one that a lot of people might be familiar with, and it's Woodland Walk. It's kind of a community favorite, pretty family-friendly, I think, trail. Can you tell us a little bit about that trail and what people might expect to see if they went on a walk there?
Sure, yeah. I would say the Woodland Walk area is probably the most popular area. We generally do it as a hike with the Burke Mountain Naturalists in June, which is the anniversary of the park. So we do a sort of a figure-8 loop of the Woodland Walk. And but there's many ways you can do the Woodland Walk. You don't have to do the complete. You can just do certain sections of it. So like you say, it is family friendly because people can go as far as they feel comfortable and then return, or they can do a bigger loop. To do the bigger loop, it's about 11 kilometers and about 300 meters of elevation gain.
So that's doable, right?
Depending on who you are.
Depending on who you are. And then also, are there things that people see along the way? I think there's some waterfalls that you might be able to enjoy along that route. Yeah,
there's 3 pretty good waterfalls along the way. There's a viewpoint, not the greatest viewpoint, but a little bit of a viewpoint. But you do see views along the way. But the forest is the main thing. And it's consisting of mainly old logging roads. Some that would have been drivable, and other ones they would have just been temporary roads that they would have pulled logs along and such.
When's your favorite time to do the Woodland Walk?
Boy.
Spring, summer, fall, everything?
I hike it all year. It's low enough that that it's rarely have snow on it for a long period of time. But for the waterfalls, it's probably better not to go when there's hardly any water, and not to go when there's a ton of water. But it gives you a totally different perspective seeing it.
And I think there can be a lot of water running down off Burke Mountain. I know we went up once in the winter, and there was a lot of water coming down, but I think there have been some improvements now where there's small bridges and things crossing some of those streets and creeks and things, making it a little bit more navigable for families and people, I suppose, take dogs up there as well.
Sure.
Is it on leash?
It should be on leash, yeah. Yeah, there is a fine from BC Parks if your dog's off leash.
Okay, so that's good to know.
Yeah. So it's an incredible walk through the forest. I'm always amazed because I've hiked it so many times and seen it so many times, but to take groups through there and to have people just like in awe of what it's like, and that is it's pretty amazing. And it's, even though it was logged about 115 years ago, some of the old stumps have some real character to them.
Yeah.
So it's really neat to see that, and it's also neat to see how the forest is regenerated. In that that the little saplings that were from 115 years ago have grown up into large trees.
And this is natural regeneration. Nothing has been replanted.
As far as I know.
Oh, okay.
I wasn't around in 1915, so
you can't say for sure.
that's right. And so that's always neat to see, is to see the old stumps and to just imagine what the forest was like at that time. And one day, if you live long enough, you'll get to see what it looks like again. So
fingers crossed.
yes. So the other thing is there's some artifacts from the old logging days and that too that you can see along the way. Old pieces of stove and some rail. And that was the other thing I was going to mention, was not only are the trails logging roads, but some of them were old narrow gauge railway.
Really?
So they logged and they put the logs onto trains and brought them down the hill.
So there's a train that ran down Burke Mountain?
In many different areas. You wouldn't realize it until you look for it.
Right.
But I know people that have found many of the old railway spikes up there, and there's places where you can see the old rail and different things like
So
that.
something to look out for when you're walking up there.
Yeah, there's always the animals around too. So you don't be surprised if you happen to see a bear up there as well.
Yes, and more so as we're developing up the side of the mountain a little bit more. There's definitely bear country there.
Yep.
Anything else we might see up there, wildlife-wise or plant-wise, that might be of interest?
It's regenerating, so it's interesting to go that I've been going for over the years, and what I call sort of a dead forest is kind of the understory, is there isn't any understory. And over the years of going, you see all the plants as some of the trees die and fall over, a little bit more light comes through the canopy, and the vegetation starts sprouting up.
It's an opportunity for something else to take root and soak up that sun.
That's right, show itself.
Yeah.
It's been hiding for a while.
Yeah, waiting. Yeah, so it's a beautiful walk. And how long does it take to do for the average hiker?
So most people would probably do it in about 4 hours. When we go out with a larger group, we allow 5 hours. Right. But we take our time and we explain what to see in that. But I'm sure somebody, if they were a speedy hiker, they could probably do it in 3 or 3.5 hours.
Okay, so this is a hike that to watch out for in June, and to go with Burke Mountain Naturalists if you haven't been before, and enjoy a guided hike up to Woodland Walk.
Yeah, I will mention one thing that, but back from last year when there was the atmospheric river, there was a slide on Burke Mountain in quite a few different areas. Presently, the Woodland Walk has the bridge isn't out, but the creek diverted and went beside the bridge, and so. I would only go if it hasn't rained for a couple of days, or especially as we get into the summer, it won't be a problem. But it's in these winter days when rainfall comes more often and heavier.
Okay, that's some good advice then. So maybe save it for a drier day for now.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, you can only go so far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's lots of trails to choose from on Burke Mountain. If we go up a little bit higher, I think on the Coquitlam Lakeview Trail.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about that trail? How does it differ from Woodland Walk, and what's different on this one?
Sure. The Coquitlam Lakeview Trail and the Woodland Walk both start off of Harper Road,
Okay.
which is off of Coast Meridian, so on the sort of the south west side of Burke Mountain. And so they both start around that area and go up. And now the Coquitlam Lakeview Trail is more of a sort of a direct trail, where the Woodland Walk Trail is more wanders around and goes up and down.
Kind of loop around. Okay.
Right. So the Coquitlam Lakeview Trail is pretty much all on old logging roads, except for one section that was the road was extremely deteriorating. That a side trail was put in to avoid that area.
So you can't. You should be able to follow the trail without any problems.
Should be able to,
Okay.
but you also, especially when you get on this trail that's off the logging road, it does twist around a little bit. So you have to look for where the path is, or where the next marker is.
Right. So it is marked.
It is marked, yes.
How is it in steepness, like compared to difficulty? Is it more challenging than Woodland Walk?
So the distance is similar in that the Coquitlam Lakeview Trail is 10 kilometers long, but the elevation almost is more than twice as much.
Okay, so it's a heftier hike.
It is 640 meters of elevation gain.
Well, it's starting to get up there then.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a great hike in that there used to be a viewpoint that looked into the Coquitlam Lake, and that was slowly overgrowing through 2010 and 2012. And a couple of my friends and that, we went up there and we were wandering around off the trail a bit, and we found another fabulous viewpoint.
Oh, awesome.
So in 2014, we put in a short trail but steep to what people now class as the viewpoint, and it's pretty spectacular.
So you're looking right down over Coquitlam Lake.
You're from the south end of it. You look right down on the dam,
wow.
and you look up the lake quite a distance.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah. So and across to Eagle Ridge on the other side, as well as you can see Vancouver and Vancouver Island from there.
Vancouver Island.
Yes.
So go up on a nice day.
Yeah,
where
on a
you've got
clear
good
day.
View. And how long would it take normally to do that hike, given that it's a little bit tougher of a hike?
Probably about 6 hours.
Okay, so allow 6 hours.
Yeah.
Plus.
Plus it depends on, you have to sort of gauge yourself on
How fit you are.
Yeah. So one of always the guides to me is that if you're reading from a guidebook or from a website or whatever, if you find you go on one hike and you take about that time that they suggest, then that's great. But if you start finding that you're doing it in under that time or over that time, you can always judge it for the next hike.
That's a really good tip. So you can kind of calibrate yourself, like get an idea of how quick you are compared to the guidebooks, and then use that as a guide for further hikes.
That's right. And I would also like to mention that it can also be turned into a bit of a loop trail. There's
okay.
two options for that, where you can actually, when you return, you could drop down to Sawblade Falls, which
Right.
I don't know if I mentioned the name on the Woodland Walk, but
No, I don't think so.
But the Sawblade Falls is kind of the highlight of the Woodland Walk.
Right.
And so the Coquitlam Lakeview Trail and the Woodland Walk are sort of parallel to each other. So you can take a side trail that will take you down to Sawblade Falls, which is a lovely place to go in the summer when it's hot. You can get away from the bugs, and it's a bit cooler. And then you can return on a logging road that really isn't much further, and it just gives you a different view and a different perspective.
Oh, nice. So you have options.
Yes.
And is there a book that you find particularly helpful when it comes to those trails and finding out about more trails?
Yeah, sure. If this is one of the great books in the area, a local writer to this book, and so it has some great suggestions in there of loop trips, not only on Burke Mountain but into the Widgeon Valley as well.
And I hope that at some point you'll come back and we'll talk about Widgeon, because
I would love to.
A place I love as
Right.
well. Okay, so anything else, any further tips on the Coquitlam Lakeview Trail?
There's a small waterfall on the way up. You're mainly going up to get to the viewpoint. That's sort of what your main goal is. But it's still a lovely walk. Like, even though you're walking on old logging roads, a lot of people wouldn't recognize them as being logging roads.
They're sort of grown back in a little bit, and
Yeah.
no.
But they offer a fairly nice grade to go up on these hikes.
Doable.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, let's go up a little bit higher to Monroe and Dennett Lakes. Now
Sure.
you're getting into a little bit different of a kind of terrain and ecosystem. Can you tell us about Monroe and Dennett Lakes and what we might find there, and again how that trail is different from the lower elevation trails?
Yeah, so we're getting into quite a bit more difficult hike. And so it starts on well, you can start on both sides of the mountain because there's trails all over the place. But the shortest way to go up to Monroe and Dennett is from Quarry Road.
Is that the steepest way as well?
It's shorter, but yeah, I would say it's probably steeper.
Okay.
You're starting at a slightly lower elevation, but it's not as far that way.
Okay, so that's the more direct route, but a bit of a climb.
Yes, so to go to Monroe and Dennett, you're looking at about 12 kilometers and about 1,000 meters of elevation gain.
Okay, so significantly steeper than the other two trails.
Yes. And so, as I mentioned, starting on Quarry Road, which is about 4 kilometers past Minnecatta Park.
Right.
On a gravel road.
Okay. And then what would be different about Monroe? You would see Monroe first.
Yes.
And what would you see there?
So the main sort of goal of these hikes is to go to the lakes. You can swim, you can fish in the lakes.
Oh, okay.
But there are some viewpoints along the way as well, which break up the steepness of the trail. It's a trail, I believe, that was put in back in the early 1900s when they put a dam on Monroe Lake.
Is that dam still there?
The dam is still there, but it's been breached. It was breached in 1981.
Okay.
So the lake was used or both Dennett and Monroe were used as reservoirs for water for the quarry, rock quarry, down on Quarry Road.
Okay, that makes sense then. I was wondering how that worked, but okay.
Yeah, so there was actually a person that lived on Monroe Lake, and through signals he was told how much water to release from the dam.
Wow, I mean, who knew that?
Yeah, well,
that's an interesting bit of history right there. I had no idea.
And his name is Ted Kay, and
okay.
a lake on Burke Mountain has been named Ted Kay.
So it's all starting to make sense now. So you were saying that you can actually swim in these lakes if you want. So you go up and spend the day. Can you camp overnight?
Yeah, people camp at both Monroe and Dennett lakes.
Okay.
So the trail, as I mentioned, is quite steep. There's different portions of it that are quite nice switchbacks, and then there's some other sections that the trail pretty much goes straight up. Now, what my thought on it was that in the 1950s there was a fire that came through on the lower slopes, and I think when the fire came through and took out all the large trees, afterwards people sort of didn't see the switchback so much, so they just started going straight up.
They went straight up.
Yeah. So some of the lower part of the hike is quite steep, and then as you get up further, there's more switchbacks on the way to Monroe Lake.
Okay, and then when you climb up to Dennett, it's further up to Dennett, and then does Dennett, you climb back down to get to Dennett?
The opposite, actually. Before you get to Monroe Lake, though, there's a couple of nice viewpoints.
Okay.
One at 500 meters and one at 700 meters.
A good excuse to stop.
That's right, for sure. Or even just that could be your day.
Right.
Quite often I've met people on the trail that they do it once a week, that's their gross grind, that they go there and go up to the viewpoint and that's their day. So to get to Monroe Lake, you do have to gain the elevation, and quite steep. When you get close to the top, you start getting into some quite large old growth trees, which is really nice to see. And then you crest, and then you have to drop about, say, 40 meters or so to get down to Monroe Lake.
Oh, okay. And can you hike it spring, summer, fall? Me
personally, I would suggest hiking it when the snow's gone.
So maybe July,
you can probably get in there depending on, it really depends on the year. I've been up there in December and only had about 6 inches of snow.
Oh, wow.
But then afterwards, into January and February, we got a whole pile of snow. So sometimes it's hard to predict. So sometimes you just have to go on these trips, and when you get to a point that you don't feel comfortable being on the snow,
that's the time to turn back.
That's right.
Yeah, you can always save it for another day.
That's right. So I would suggest probably, June. Would be a good time, and be prepared in the early times that there might be some mud.
As water be very wet sometimes.
It can be wet in that too. Yeah, and the trail can be a little bit overgrown in places, but it's generally pretty good. It does see quite a few people.
And still lots of bears.
Yeah, again with the bear, I see more bears in the urban areas than I do once I get half an hour into the hike, and that I honestly haven't seen that many bears around. Monroe and Dennett Lakes, but they're certainly there. I have seen them, but I don't see them on every hike.
Right. And then as far as getting to the top of Burke, that's not the top, is it? Like you could still go up further. Oh
yeah, from Monroe Lake you can actually climb again and get up onto what's known as the Ridge Trail, which takes you to there's kind of 3 different summits of it's more of a ridge than a mountain.
Right. Okay.
But there's what we call the South Summit and the North Summit and Pika Peak that's higher.
Okay. So lots and lots of places to explore, and I understand you've gone on all those trails. So opportunities to get out there right in our own own neighborhood. We don't have to go too far to get to some really spectacular places.
Sure. Can I say a few more things about Monroe?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So one of the interesting things about Monroe and Dennett, they have a plant known as sundew,
Yes.
which is a carnivorous plant. So it eats bugs, which is really neat to see. It's really small, but that's pretty cool to see. And as well as mainly on the way to Dennett Lake, there's marsh marigolds, which are quite nice to see as well.
So the sundew, if somebody was looking for that, would it be in a marshy, wetter area?
It is, yeah, and it's you really have to look for it. It's red in color, but it's really small.
Okay.
So I didn't know for years that there was sundew at Monroe Lake as well until one of the BC Parks guys, when I mentioned sundew at Dennett, he said it's also at Monroe. So then I started looking at Monroe, and sure enough, it's there as well.
Oh, interesting. And then marsh marigold, tell us a little bit about that.
It's a white flower, but it's pretty. It comes up in very damp areas.
Okay. So lots of interesting plant life to look for up there as well as wildlife. And as far as birding, are there many birds?
Yeah, actually, one of the spots, there's an incredible viewpoint that's between Monroe and Dennett Lake, that you can sit on that viewpoint and you have Monroe Lake kind of at your feet, and you look across to Golden Ears and the other mountains around Golden Ears.
Sounds gorgeous.
Oh, it is. It's spectacular. Yeah, one of the guys that wrote one of the 103 Hikes books, I took him up there and he goes, wow, he says, this has got to be one of the best viewpoints in the area.
Wow, and it's in your own backyard.
Yeah, yeah. And so it's great sitting on there and watching the raptors and the ravens and that flying around. And sometimes you're on these places and the actual planes are flying below you. So that's quite interesting, knowing that you're quite high up.
That's a really interesting perspective, to be looking down on the plains.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. But yeah, just the different and smaller birds that habitat the area in that as well.
Right.
Even I had a friend that was at Monroe Lake one day, and sandhill cranes.
Sandhill cranes?
Were at Monroe Lake calling like crazy.
I would never have thought.
Yeah,
Really?
he had video of it, and it was quite amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So, a great way to exercise, get out, learn about the local ecology. Are there any last words you want to say about the hikes on Burke?
Yeah.
I know we've only covered a few, but
Yeah, it's one of the things that, when I started hiking up there, there wasn't a lot of, or hardly any trail markers. So it was a matter of going up and hiking so far, and feeling comfortable with it and then returning. So to some degree, even though there is far more signage up there, you have to be careful of where you're going, making sure that you know how to get back.
Right.
And not always relying on instruments that take batteries if you don't have backup. So that's a real key, is to explore up there, but don't get too far out that you can't return. So
right, don't get into a situation where you're uncomfortable, then your battery dies and you don't have your trail app and you don't know where you are.
Yeah,
So,
but it's every trip can be different. I can't count how many times I've been on some of these trails and seeing different things and being wowed, or going with other people and they see something that you've never seen before. So it's always a different experience.
which means you just have to go more than once.
Yes.
Right? And go with different people and experience different things on the mountain.
Yep.
So we know that things are changing rapidly, and what is your hopes or your visions for Burke Mountain in the future, say within the next 100 years? What do you hope? What are your hopes for Burke Mountain?
The biggest thing is I hope people respect it. I hope it it stays a park, with all the different, the populations coming in, more people. I'm hoping that they respect it. I'm hoping that BC Parks, has funding and takes care of the park, and to make it viable, for everyone to go there. One of the things that I would like to see is also that, at some point, if the gun club does close, if that does happen, I would like to see that become park headquarters.
Oh, and that would be a perfect fit. That makes sense.
It's right there, but it depends on what the life is of the gun club and that. So.
Interesting. So there's some things that we will be watching for and keeping our eye on. And, I just want to say thank you so much for coming in and sharing some of your experiences. It's much appreciated. And I really hope that we can talk again, because there are so many trails in the Tri-Cities. You've been on them all, and we'd love to learn more.
Great. I'd be happy to come back.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
So thanks for joining us. This is We've Got Issues, and we've been talking to Ian McArthur, who's the president of Burke Mountain Naturalists.